So today is really casual. The goal behind it is obviously you've enjoyed incredible success in your personal and business life, and I think you're a man of the community and obviously very well respected. So I think there's a lot that you could share. And the audience today is folks who are both in entrepreneurial business or business in general that might be working for a company and trying to work their way up the corporate ladder, or somebody who's just graduating from college and trying to get ahead. And I know that you've been in really all of those seats at some point, right? You've been successful in both school and in multiple arenas of business, and both entrepreneurial and now as a partner in the law firm Barclay Damon. So I thought maybe we could start today, if you're okay with it, with just where you grew up, because I think it's really, really interesting.
Sure.
A really interesting story and a part of your history that and what's that led to.
Sure. And first of all, I appreciate the kind words. I happen to be a nodder, so I'm not necessarily agreeing with all the praise, but I'm listening. So, but thank you. I do like to tell the story of my beginnings. My parents were Irish immigrants. They came over from Ireland separately in the 1950s. Like many immigrants at the time, Irish, Italians, all kinds. They settled in the Bronx, New York, and I was born in 1971. I lived on the Grand Concourse, which is, for those of you that have ever been to a Yankee game and have been worried about their safety. I grew up probably about 30 blocks from Yankee Stadium. That was my first place. My parents split when I was relatively young, and I ended up moving to another area of the Bronx. But I lived in the Bronx until my late 20s. So I went through all of school, started my early career there. I'll start with my education and how I ended up becoming a patent attorney.
Yeah, and I think you and I have been friends for many, many years, so I've gotten kind of stories over the campfire, which you do a great job of hosting, but I know that the first one that I'm aware of, your first job, I think it was while you were still in high school, was working in a deli in the Bronx. Is that correct?
Correct. I went to an all-boys high school, and I played sports up until about sophomore year when I was no longer good enough to play basketball. And my English teacher at the time knew a gentleman that owned a deli grocery store in the Bronx. It would, for those that know a bit of Spanish, it was called a bodega.
Okay.
And the opportunity was to go there and stock shelves. And before that, I had some smaller jobs just working at the school or whatever. But my first real job was at this deli. And it was an after-school job, 4 hours a day, $5 an hour. And over the summer, they weren't too aware of child labor laws. I would work 5 or 6 days, 10, 12-hour days, loved the money and loved the experience, and started there when I was 15, and I stayed there until I was halfway through college, on a part-time basis. And what I learned from the experience was just customer service, customer interaction. I learned what hard work was, and I learned, my next job after that was an internship during college for engineering. And while others thought there was a lot of work and stressful, I thought the idea of being in an office and getting paid a lot more money than I was before, and dressing up and not, at the deli, it was amazing. It was great work, but physical labor, exhausting. So I really appreciated my opportunity to enter the professional world.
Awesome. So you were initially playing basketball at an all-boys school. How many kids at the school?
So there were, 4-year high school, and there were probably about 600 or 700 boys, yeah. And
you were, if I'm not mistaken, the valedictorian of that high school, is that correct?
I was the valedictorian.
Can you talk a little bit about, just for some people, that smarts and intelligence comes easy and school is easy for them. Others have to work, and then others yet still may be gifted in that area but work just as hard. Can you talk about what it took to balance that in high school, to be working at the deli as the many hours that you talked about, but also be so successful that you could lead your classmates?
Yeah, so fortunately for me, I grew up in an environment where my mom, who only got to 8th grade in Ireland and then came over to America and got her GED. She was very smart. She happened to be a really smart woman, but she also had a real appreciation for school, and she really thought it was the key to success. And we didn't have much. We were living on public assistance. We were, welfare, and we just didn't have a lot. And she saw education as the way out. And so from a very early age, I remember 1st or 2nd grade sitting with my sister doing homework and our mom telling us this was the way out, to get a good education, get a good job, the American dream. She came to America and she wanted her kids to have that. So from a very early age, I understood the importance of school, and I like sports. I treated it as a game, and the score was your grades. And I wasn't necessarily cutthroat competitive. I thought I was always a good classmate, I would give help to people when they asked for it, but I was pretty focused on, maybe in some respects a little bit unhealthy, the focus on trying to be number one, because it would then lead to a college scholarship that I could not otherwise afford, and that would lead to a job and whatever. So I really focused on education, and I studied hard. I remember early on seeing an interview with Michael Jordan, and they were talking about why is he such a phenomenal basketball player. And he, the consensus was not only was he the most talented on the floor, he was the hardest worker in practice. So I didn't take anything for granted. I was blessed with, some intellect from my mom, but I outworked people, but in an efficient manner. I wouldn't study all day. I would say I'm going to devote 2 hours, hour and a half, 3 hours, whatever it was needed. I would study hard, but I still made room for friends. I still made room for sports. I made room for work. I made room for having a balanced life. And it's something I'm proud of, that I was able to focus on work. And yes, I was a quote unquote nerd, but I had a good group of friends. I was into athletics. I was going to the parties. And from an early age, I thought that balance was important. So I studied really hard, but I was very efficient about it. And I was getting the results. So I was continually motivated to keep doing that.
So you had a goal, which you just outlined, was really, you just said that your family was on welfare. It wasn't like there was going to be a silver spoon handed to you, and that college was definitely a destination that you knew you were headed to.
Right.
You knew that you had a goal that you needed to be attractive and to be able to earn it. Were you able to reach that goal? I
was, and it started even earlier. So I was in 2nd grade. I was in public school through 1st grade, and public school in the Bronx wasn't necessarily a great place to be. And there were Catholic schools in the Bronx, but they cost money. So my mother, was a very religious person, and it was a big part of the church, and asked if her children could go to the school, and we would do anything and everything. We would set up for church. I would be an altar boy. I would set up the chairs for various reception. We would do it everything, but you'd also had to keep the grades up. So from a very early age, I understood that we got free tuition as long as I did all these things, which included be a really good student. So from a very early age, school was going to be free if I got great grades. So then through grammar school, the next one was high school. High school, I didn't want to go to a public high school. I wanted to go to a private Catholic school. And I needed to get a scholarship. To get a scholarship, you had to do really well in school. And to keep the scholarship, you had to be in the top few students. So the whole time it was about getting the opportunity to go to a better school because the grades were there. So it was never a question and luckily I had the ability, but I also had the drive and, from my mom. So I did ultimately get a full scholarship to go to Manhattan College. I have a lot of people ask me, how did you go? I was an engineer, which we'll talk about. And then I was a lawyer. Like, why did you switch? So I was a sophomore in high school, and I took the practice SAT, and I did well. I didn't do, amazing, but I did pretty well. And relative to my other classmates, I did very well. And when I met with the guidance counselor, which I was open to listening to because I didn't really know what I wanted to do other than I saw some movies with lawyers in it, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And I kind of knew, doctor, lawyer, if you do well in school, that's maybe what you think of doing. So I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And the guidance counselor, his name was Mr. Langelotti. He asked me, what are you thinking of doing? I think I want to be a lawyer. And he said, man, your grades in math and science are really good. It's like, do you ever think about, being an engineer. And I said, I don't really know what that is. And he goes, well, have you ever heard what a patent lawyer is? And I said, I have no idea what a patent lawyer is. And he goes, well, a patent lawyer, you get to combine legal knowledge with technical knowledge. And he literally scripted a plan for me that said, you should look into becoming a patent attorney. And this is what you should do. You should go to Manhattan College and major in engineering. It's a great engineering school. It was also Catholic. You should get a job working for an engineering firm that might also have, a law department, and see if they'll pay for you to go to law school at night, and then become a lawyer. And then, and if, who knows, if you like engineering enough, you never go to law school. So
he laid out the path.
He laid out the path, and I looked into it. There wasn't any or much internet then. So I just asked around, and I had some, folks that were able to, teach me. I went to a library to read about, being a lawyer and different kinds of lawyers. And I did get a full scholarship to Manhattan College, and I studied electrical engineering. And as my bio says, I also was ranked number one in the engineering school.
Wow. So I want to go one step backwards too, because you kind of alluded to it a little bit, second grade, public school, wanting to stay away from that. Growing up in the Bronx in the 80s, kind of a melting pot, much different, even though it's still not always the safest place. In the 1980s in particular, I think it was a very volatile kind of environment. Can you talk about what it took to navigate that? And did you see anybody kind of, even from your high school class, maybe get mixed up in that?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the Bronx in the 80s, and things have, in some respects, things have gotten gentrified. Neighborhoods in Brooklyn and in the Bronx, they're now nicer areas. But at the time, there was a lot of poverty, a lot of drug use, a lot of crime. I had 2 cars stolen when I was in college. I came out to go to school, and 2 of my cars were gone.
Not at the same time.
Yeah, not at the same time. No, I went for the bus for about 6 months before I got the next car. But it was sports. It was just being involved in sports and staying busy. I was, the school that I went to had a priest that was incredibly into sports, and my 7th and 8th grade teams, literally in basketball, literally played 70 game seasons. Wow. And he knew, and those kids stayed out of trouble because we had practices and games, and if you messed up, you were off the team. And it was the key to staying busy and staying out of trouble. And some people did, after that experience, when they went off to high school and they went, they may have gone to a public school then, or even in Catholic school, they got, once people lost sports because of maybe academic probation or whatever, they really went off the rails. That was in my experience, my group of friends. But I also had a mom that was, at the time, I thought it was too much in terms of her attention and strictness, and I had to go home earlier than everybody else, and I wasn't allowed to stay over at people's houses. And, I thought it was very strict, but it kept me out of trouble.
And you were friends with everybody.
Friends with everybody.
You're a very likable person.
And I saw, later in high school, I would go to parties and, see things going on, and I wasn't necessarily a saint, but there was that base foundation that I had, that I knew where I was going, and I wasn't going to jeopardize that by making a bad decision. Right. So, but yeah, it was tough. It was easy enough to stay out of trouble because I had such a strict household, and I also had really good network at school. School was my kind of foundation. My dad wasn't really around, so you hear a lot of, true but bad things about the Catholic Church and how things went wrong. I personally had an amazing experience with priests that couldn't have been, more kind, and, they were really mentors to me. And so it was amazing.
Okay. Yeah. But you kept in touch with your father, and
I did keep in touch,
and had a relationship with him for still.
I did. But it wasn't like how you and I are fathers.
Right.
In terms of, it was more show up for birthdays or communion or things like that. So,
okay. So then you're at Manhattan College, and I took you back a step. So let's pick up from there.
So I went to Manhattan College, studied electrical engineering. I commuted. I lived in the Bronx and Manhattan College, even though it's called Manhattan and they say it's in Riverdale, New York, it's technically in Manhattan. It's technically in the Bronx. But I had a different experience than most people that go to college and dorm there. Yep. I was able to have fun and kind of party with those people, but I didn't stay there, so it was a different experience. What I will say, though, is my group of friends, some of whom, didn't go the academic route the way I did. They graduated high school and went into construction, or they became police officers, or lots of different careers. Instead of, necessarily being in the dorm, we lived in New York City. Right. So we were, 18 or 19. I looked like I was 15, but we had our fake IDs and we knew places to go. So I had at a very early age, I had access to this amazing city, which once again, you could get in trouble or not. And I learned about making good decisions or whatever, but I didn't have the, fraternity life, but I had a pretty fun New York City life.
You're obviously very into music. Is that about the time that this all materialized for you?
Absolutely. Because what you would do is where you could get into these big clubs. Mm-hmm. And if you went early enough, it didn't really get going until midnight, but if you got there at 9, you could probably get in with your ID. Uh-huh. But it was, just dance clubs, people from all over the world, all over the country, all over New York City. You just meet a diverse group of people, and that's where I kind of found that, that passion for like listening to music and dance music and things like that.
And what is it that is it the energy of that kind of thing? Like you can there's electricity in that atmosphere, right? Is that kind of what is the attractiveness to it?
Yeah, it's, with the pretty busy life between, the pressure of school, which I enjoy, but it's still pressure, the work to do, studying. My sister and I did a lot around the house. At some points we looked after our mom who had some mental health issues, so there was a lot on my plate. Uh-huh. And it was just a great release. Mm-hmm. Whether it was sitting around listening to music, I could escape from not that I wasn't enjoying my life, but there was a lot of pressure, and it was just a nice release. And then going downtown and New York City, and you're meeting lots of new people. So every night was a different experience. They weren't all positive experiences, and sometimes you didn't get in, or you couldn't find parking, or there was a fight or something. So they weren't all positive experiences, but they were experiences. Yeah. We weren't sitting in basements and sitting around a keg or whatever. We were out doing stuff. And I think I learned a lot about what made me tick, and what I really enjoyed and still enjoy is whether now it's a concert or just sitting around by a fire listening to music. It's one of the ways escape it means you're escaping something, but it's more I get to relax best.
Yeah. Well, that's like living too, right? That some of the things that are the most exciting have that tinge of like, there's a lot of people that are going into this, and there's almost, maybe it's the wrong word, but there's like this hint of underlying danger, or I don't know what's going to happen. Like this is, I could either have an unbelievable time, or this could really potentially go off the rail, right? It's like we're riding that rail.
And I saw a bit of both. Yeah. Okay. So, and to be clear, I was having fun. There were some people having a lot more fun, but it was a pretty unique experience. Now for my children, I was hopeful, and 2 of my kids are now they're having the traditional college experience. They're away at school, in the dorms, and that's what I wanted for them, but that's not what I had. So, but I had a really good experience. I really enjoyed education. I enjoyed learning. I had a very good experience, and did well enough to, keep marching on that plan. So, cool. Yeah.
So Manhattan College, did you have any mentors or anybody there? I mean, obviously you had the guidance counselor in high school that kind of laid this out. Did you meet any more along the way?
Yeah, I just had some amazing professors, and unfortunately for them, they couldn't be more disappointed when I told them my plan was to become a lawyer, because they were deep into the science and deep into the technical world, and they wanted nothing more than me to maybe pursue a PhD, or at least pursue a master's degree, and maybe work with them on various projects, because I really was active and really enjoyed my experience there, but I needed to go get an engineering job to try and find my way to law school.
So there was the puzzle. This was a step along the path.
Correct.
That you knew the whole time. So you graduated as the valedictorian of your engineering class from Manhattan College. You get the engineering job, right? And how long? Talk about that experience and how long you did that. And
sure.
And ultimately, you did decide, obviously, to become a lawyer. But talk about I think there was some weight along that decision, and wasn't necessarily a linear path, correct?
Correct, yeah. So when I ended up working for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as an electrical engineer, that entity is a state agency, and it operates the airports, the bridges, the tunnels, the path, subway system. So it's a transportation organization. I specifically worked for the airports. I designed electrical systems for runways, taxiways, the lighting systems, airport security. I was doing electrical engineering design, and then you could see what, you design something and it gets built. It's pretty good. It was exciting for me. It was a good experience. And, the reason I went to work there were other engineering jobs that if I wasn't planning on going to law school, there were engineering jobs in the semiconductor field was pretty big at the time, or you could go into consulting and you could be building projects all over the world or all over the country. But I wasn't telling my employer that I was planning on going to law school, because the goal was to get in as an engineer, try and impress them, and then say, would you mind supporting my opportunity to go to law school? So there were jobs that I, interviewed for, and they'd say, great, you're going to be out on the West Coast, Silicon Valley, building data centers or whatever. And then next year you could be over in Dubai. And those are really exciting, but I knew ultimately I want to go to law school. So I need to be in a place where I know I won't have to travel. So I chose a job where the furthest I'd have to go were the local airports to work on. There were no projects overseas or anything like that. So eventually I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I also loved having a 9-to-5 job and being able to go. And I played softball, like bar softball league with my buddies. And when it was too cold to play softball, we played darts, a dart league. I wasn't any good at either, but I had a lot of fun. And I was enjoying that. And I was 25, 26, and I thought, am I gonna do this or not? So long story short, the Port Authority did not pay for me to go to law school, but they understood that I would be going at night, and they created a work environment where I was able to get out of work every day at 5. So yes, so the next chapter is to go to law school.
You paid for yourself to go to law school?
So I ended up getting a scholarship to law school based on my good grades in college and my experience. And so I ended up I had to pay a little bit, but for the most part, that was also a scholarship. So I was pretty fortunate for that too. And so I didn't need them to pay. And, my job was at the World Trade Center. When I was an engineer for the Port Authority owned the World Trade Center, I was on the 72nd floor of One World Trade, and I worked there.
This was about 1995-ish?
So I started there in 93, and I actually stopped working there in January 2001, 9 months before 9/11. And I was halfway through the law school at night is 4 years, and I was at law school and I applied for an internship at a law firm in New York City, and they said, sure, you can work here over the summer. And then they said, most people don't work, most people don't go at night. Do you want to just switch careers now and come stop engineering and come work for us your last 2 years as an intern? And there were various reasons why I didn't want to do it, which included I had 9 years into something you needed 10 years for a pension for. But I ended up saying I'm going to make the break because this was the plan all along, and this is an opportunity. I'm going to do it. And that opportunity, instead of staying at the Port Authority another 2 years and potentially being there on 9/11, I left in January to start my internship in Midtown. So I wasn't there
with the law firm.
With the law firm. So I left.
Which was paid.
Yeah, I was making almost as much as I was as an engineer. But I worked full-time during my last, I worked full-time for all of law school, but my last 2 years I actually worked at the law firm that I was ultimately going to work at. There is a funny story there. I went to New York Law School, and at the time, there's different levels of, there's the Ivy League schools, and there's the high reputation schools. New York Law School, there's kind of 4 tiers of law schools. And at the time, New York Law School kind of was between the second and third tier. But New York Law School sounds a lot like NYU, New York University Law School.
Right.
And NYU is one of those tier 1 schools. So after my second year of law school, I was the #1 student in the evening program, and I started to apply for law positions, and I applied to some of the best law firms in the country that had New York City offices. And some of them, rightfully so or otherwise, unless you go to one of the right schools, they won't look at your resume. But I aimed high, And I was able to, I think I applied to, say, the top 20 law firms or whatever. And I was able to get, they call them summer associate positions. They're essentially internships. I was able to get offers from several of them, but the one I really wanted to work at was a law firm named Kirkland & Ellis. It's one of and the reason I wanted to work there is they were doing real patent law litigation. Like some of these other firms, they didn't have big groups. It was a great reputation. So I applied there and I didn't hear anything back. I didn't get rejected. I didn't get accepted. And I was about to accept an offer at one of these other law firms, which would have been fine. I went on the internet and I just looked. Kirkland & Ellis had, at the time, they had about 1,000 lawyers. Did anyone go to New York Law School? None. You could search their bios. Did anyone go to Manhattan College? One guy who happened to be in charge of the patent litigation group.
No kidding.
In New York City. His name's John Damaris. So I emailed him and I said, I know you're really busy. I sent my resume in through the normal channels. I didn't hear back. No worries if that's the way it is, that's fine, but I'm about to accept another offer. I figured I'd reach out to you with the Manhattan College connection. He got right back to me and said, can you come see me right now? So I left Lower Manhattan, went to their offices. He said, yeah, this is good. He goes, I can't guarantee anything, but I can set you up with an interview. You'll meet 5 people. So I show up for the interview and the woman from Human Resources, gets me and we sit down and she goes, I'm going to take you to your first interview. The person you're going to be interviewing, and many people, they went to NYU. She's
great.
She's like, how do you like NYU? And I said, I think it's a fantastic school. So I interviewed, and the people that I interviewed with, quickly figured out I didn't, they read the resume and saw New York law, and they asked mostly about,
HR maybe not so much, but
I said, okay,
it's
it's fantastic. So I ended up getting that opportunity and ended up working there for about 4 or 5 years before I made the move up to Syracuse.
And also, there's a story that I remember about your father and kind of the American dream idea, and the fact that, you had made it. Right, being an engineer, having the job that you had, and kind of reaching the life that you made. Can you just define that for someone? One of the things that I've learned over my time is kind of we're often limited by the way that we think. Right? A certain level of success is to some people is beyond imagination, yet to another person might not be what they see for themselves. So can you maybe just expand a little bit on that story and that piece of your life and I think there was a specific, time where you're making this change and you're saying this. Can you just kind of expand on that story?
Sure, yeah. So I was fortunate enough, my engineering job was going well. It was, I was getting paid pretty well. I was going to have a pension. I liked the people I work with. It was very steady. It was very safe. So I could easily have been content. And my dad, who was a carpenter and he worked in a union and really valued those things, stability, a pension, all these things. And, the idea of giving that up for anything that might have some uncertainty was, it's not that he went out of his way to discourage, but he was very surprised by it. And even myself, even though I had this plan, I questioned it too, because I was getting very comfortable. Every time you switch, you have to, in many instances, you have to climb another mountain.
Right.
So I was climbing my engineering career mountain. I'd gotten my license. I was doing well. I could see a path where one day I might be in charge of the electrical part group, and it was a good job, and I really respected it. I was saying, I'm climbing this mountain. Do I really want to let the rock roll back down to the bottom of the mountain and push another one up? Because I had been doing that, throughout my career. And, I thought about it a little, do I just stay on this course? But luckily I'd like to pursue my dream, but I also thought I'd be able to do more interesting things. I'd have an opportunity to have, a higher income. A lot of it was just the interest. I thought it would be a very interesting career doing what I'm doing now, and it turns out it has been. But yeah, complacency is dangerous if you're, and who you surround yourself with. At that state job, there were a lot of people that were complacent that would, if you don't find those people that will motivate you, go find them at the gym, go find them through social networks or what have you, because complacency is something that will and hey, it works for a lot of people, but if you want to try something new, if you want to aspire higher.
And kind of to the point, I've heard you tell this story from your perspective before, but the idea of success to your immigrant parents was, we're going to leave a tough situation in Ireland. We're going to start this in the new world of the United States. And now they have a son that's made it, right? Like, what are you doing? Like, how could you, you've reached, this is the reason that we came here. So he's kind of projecting into you, what are you doing, right?
Yeah, one of my good friends, still a good friend, my friend Greg Clark, he was sitting next to my dad with my mom and sister at my law school graduation. Chuck Schumer was the guest speaker. I remember it was at Lincoln Center in New York City. And because I was ranked number one, I got to walk in first. And there were a lot of awards for, constitutional law or I cleaned up. I got a lot of, and my dad sitting next to my friend Greg and says, I've talked to him. I don't know what he's thinking. And Greg opens up. This is before the ceremony, and he opens it up and he's like, see all the times Dennis's name's there? I think he's going to be all right. So it worked out. It worked out well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now you get the opportunity. You're interning at one law firm. You get the opportunity at the other law firm. You take that, and now you're in New York City. You're exposed to. Did you say it was 800 attorneys?
The firm had over 1,000. The New York office had about 200 or 300.
Yeah, amazing. So. And now you're exposed to something completely different than the engineering world. And at this point, is it like the sky's the limit? Like, holy cow! Like this is a whole new, like another mountain to climb. But this mountain is Mount Everest compared to the pool I was swimming in before.
Yes, and just the talent and the work ethic and I was so impressed by the quality of the people that, just their intelligence and their work ethic and their drive and their ability to process complex. So in patent law, you have to understand the technology, which every case could be a new technology. So you're learning about Wi-Fi one day and you're learning about chemistry the next day and you're learning about, some mechanical invention the next day. And then you have to learn it and then be able to explain it to a judge or jury has no interest in technology. Right. So it's not only learning it, but being able to explain it. And I was just so impressed with the attorneys there. But the but is, and I didn't mind it. I didn't realize how much work it was until I eventually removed myself from it. I was working 80, 90 hours a week. Now, no kids yet, traveling all over the country, important cases between big companies.
That was the business culture. It wasn't like you were the anomaly.
No, that was the culture. Yeah. And, the partners that were doing very well financially, they were leaving early at 10 p.m.
Holy cow.
And I was there till midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever. But to learn, to pay your dues, I learned more. And, I did that for 2 or 3 years after school. And, we'll talk about eventually moving up here to Syracuse to continue to do sophisticated work without the same demands.
So now it's the early 2000s, you're in your early 30s at the time, and you're still in the New York City and in this environment. That's what time do you get to work? You leave work at midnight.
You get to work at 9:30, and you work till midnight, 1 a.m. It was, lawyers, investment bankers, consultants, everybody was doing it. But it was,
So you had to in order to be successful, because if you don't do that, you're not going to get the next opportunity, right? Or you're not going to be, they're going to find somebody else that's willing to. You're in the business capital of the universe.
Yeah, and the legal capital in terms of just the competition and the law firms. And, I was fortunate enough, and, in terms of people watching this, I was fortunate enough to have a good sense of who would be good mentors.
Okay.
So there's some boss, so you're at a law firm, it's a meritocracy. Partner reaches out, who can help me? You work with that partner. I was lucky enough to work with partners that were great teachers.
Okay.
And but if they weren't, I would have found one.
Yeah.
So it's, whether it's having to change job or whether to change positions within the same company, whether to leave a company, it's pretty important early on to get great mentorship and great training. And, when I interview people now to work at my firm, I say, I can't guarantee that you're going to be happy for 20 years here. The firm that I'm at now, I've been there 15 years. But I said, what I can guarantee is in 3 to 5 years from now, you will know a whole lot more. I hope you stay, but you'll be so much more marketable in 3 to 5 years after working with me and with the group that you'll be able to, you'll be able to branch out. Hopefully you stay. Hopefully you want to be a partner and stay with us. But I can promise you that I'll make sure in 3 to 5 years, So those early jobs, you have to be enhancing your resume.
Yeah.
You have to be finding out what you like.
Right.
Like you might dive into something 80 hours a week and say, I absolutely hate this.
Right.
Well, better to know now.
Right, exactly.
And then, but finding good trainers, finding good mentors, finding out what motivates you. People are rarely successful unless, people that start with not much, that have to build something, they're rarely successful unless they're incredibly passionate about what they're doing.
Right.
And I loved it. I loved the competition. I loved the adversarial nature of things. I loved winning. I hated losing. Just like an athlete, I treated it that way. And so it was easy for me to work hard. It was easy for me to ask for more to do. But then eventually it was time to have a family.
Yeah.
And it was, you can't be there for your kids. You can't be there for your family if you're working those crazy hours. So.
And you were recently married at the time.
I was married, and we were starting to talk about having children, and my sister, who had also done the New York City, she was a CPA and she had done work for public accounting firms. She had made the choice to leave the consulting world, and she worked for a company that eventually she relocated up to Syracuse. So I was visiting her.
But I think she relocated for her husband was from the area, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Okay.
She was working for a company that had main office in New York City, but a satellite office in Syracuse, and she was up in Syracuse and met somebody up in Syracuse.
Yeah, so she has a connection to somebody already had roots here.
Correct.
Right, and that's what pulled here, which is very different than your scenario.
And I was visiting her, and and with all due respect to people from New York City, including myself, when you're from there, you think it's like, why would you ever leave? Because it has everything, and that's how I felt. So when she moved up, I thought, I didn't think it was the best move for her. But then as I was visiting her, she still had she had a challenging career. She was still doing well, and she had much better balance. So I had always prided myself on having balance in school. Like, yes, I studied hard, but I partied hard too.
Yeah. I
had lost that balance. It was all work, and I didn't see my friends. I made friends at my law firm, but it was all work. And I knew, I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to be there, I wanted to get better balance. So we made the decision to come up to Syracuse, work at a law firm up here. I went from a law firm that at the time then had 1,500 lawyers to a law firm that had 10. And it was a big change, but it was, in the beginning at least, it was 9 to 5, but pretty soon I found myself working pretty hard because I was, same thing, like rolling that rock up the mountain, up the hill again. But it was hard work, but it wasn't as demanding, not as much travel. So I was able to be there for my children, and we eventually had 3 children, ages 1, 3, and 5. So we were in the thick of it. Yeah.
And that's when you also really kind of started to find the balance.
Correct.
And I think you've maintained that. I mean, knowing you personally, I think you do a great job of that. It's one of the things that I admire about you is you find time, right? You seem to get everything done and find time. Would you say that obviously you didn't have that balance, you just articulated that for New York, but once you got here, do you find that because you're actually good now at the balance, that it makes you even better in work than when you didn't have balance? Or do you feel like because you were so focused on work, maybe does the balance ever feel like it's a negative, I guess is the question? Or does it feel like, no, it's a positive because now I'm more well-rounded? Which side of the fence do you fall on that regard?
Yeah, I think the pendulum swings a little bit if you're super busy and you've made these, commitments to coach a team, or there are moments where you're like, man, I wish I didn't have to do that because I really have to finish this. But you go coach the team and you get home and then you get on the computer and you finish it off. And you feel good that you've done it. And, everyone's heard this, when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to remember, finishing that brief. You're going to remember when your kid got the double or the home run, and you were there for that. So that being said, I still have missed my share of baseball games, but you do the best you can. You do the best you can. But I do think balance, it's all about creating a healthy, mindset, a healthy body. You can do better and you can do it for longer if you have the right mindset. So if you're going to burn out eventually, if it's all work, not everybody, but me, you're going to burn out, or you're going to feel, guilty about not being there for the kids or what have you. So I think it's been an enhancement, but there are moments where you wish you didn't have that you hadn't committed to the social engagement. Yeah.
By nature, I think you're similar. I say yes to everything, and sometimes it gets me in trouble, right? Like there's times where my wife was like, "Why the heck did she do that?"
I heard someone, I forget who it was attributed to. I think it was Matt Damon who's being interviewed, and he said he got great advice one time from either Ben Affleck gave it to Matt Damon, or the advice was, if someone asks you to do something and it's a few months down the road, it's always easy to say, sure, like I'll do that. I'll go to that charity event. I'll go to that concert or whatever. Think if it was tomorrow and you were free tomorrow, would you want to go?
Right.
And if you wouldn't want to go, don't say yes to the things because things that are in 3 months always seem like it's fine.
Yeah.
But think about it. Would you want to do that tomorrow?
That's a great way to think. I actually never heard that before. So
yeah.
that's great.
So
you go to Syracuse. Now you're here. You're kind of building from scratch again, but you're with a 10-person law firm.
Yeah.
And growing. That you were with that group, and I believe you sold. Right. How long were you with it independently? You became a partner. I think you became a partner right away when you came up here, right?
No, I came up. I was only about 3 or 4 years out of law school, and I came to this law firm, 10 lawyers, 3 or 4 partners, and they were doing exactly what I was doing, but just on a smaller scale.
Yep.
And
they must have been thrilled to have you.
It was.
I mean, you must have showed up like the shining.
It was. Yeah, I was happy to be there, and they were happy to see me. And pretty soon, I was almost as busy as I was, and I had to back off a little bit. But once again, good mentors, good teachers, and but pretty soon, one of the partners left the area, and another partner got recruited to the firm that I am now. Oh. And there was I was only 6 years out of law school, which is very early to become a partner. And there was an opening to become it was an opportunity, and I took it. And I became a partner at a relatively young age, or not young because I had delayed going to law school, but I was only 6 years out of law school.
Right.
And I became a partner, and pretty soon I had my name on the firm, and we were doing well. But there was an opportunity. What I was worried about at the time was we were so small; it was hard to recruit people. Uh-huh. And I was 40 years old with 3 young children, and I was starting to work like I used to work because we were too small. And we were doing well financially, but I wanted to go to a bigger place where I could be part of a team instead of, I had I had 2 other partners at the firm, and they were doing well, but we were all isolated doing our own things. And I wanted to become part of a bigger team where I could grow the business without necessarily, having to do every hour of work myself.
Right.
So that's
more resources.
More resources. Small businesses, you're figuring out where do we order the paper from.
The business is you.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Without
chasing,
you,
the accounting department is you. Like
right.
So I wanted to go to a place that had a sophisticated practice, marketing, business development, accounting, and I could just focus more on the law.
You left? You didn't sell that business?
The 3 of us disbanded, and we all went our separate ways. So the partnership, we were still making money. So
you sold your portion of the business and were able to sell it and become a partner right away at Barclay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I was a partner.
So you were able to package kind of
It was mostly because I had built a practice and a business. I could say I can bring this here.
Right.
And they decided that it warranted becoming a partner right out of the way, out of the gate. So
excellent. Yeah. And although it's in Syracuse, Barclay Damon, very well respected, multiple locations throughout the Northeast, right?
Yeah.
And how many attorneys there?
So when I joined, there were about 150, and now we have 300. Okay. We have offices in the upstate market, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany. But we also have a New York City office with 30 attorneys. We have 10 or 15 attorneys in Boston. We're in New Haven, small office in Toronto, office in DC. So we've expanded. And that's been a really amazing to be in a regional setting, but have access to those markets. Yeah. And, the crude analogy is if you do land a client in a Boston or a New York, they're used to paying a certain amount per hour for a lawyer. And the sales pitch is, I was in that world and I'm the same person. And, you don't want to sell only on price, but if my hourly rate is 50 to 60% of what they would pay if I was just sitting, same person in a different office. So that's been the sales pitch, and it's worked. A lot of our clients are actually from outside the area.
So you've now been in the area for over 20 years and at Barclay for 15?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was the original 5-year plan is now 20 years. So,
yeah, absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about the area, coming into this area? And I think that the central New York area, I get the opportunity to travel throughout. I cover New York City and Long Island for my job. I like going down there for 2 days at a time, and I love coming back because the pace is great there, but I enjoy leaving it and being able to go golfing or be out on the lake or whatever I can do. The leisure here, for me, is the right balance. But can you talk about the mentality? You mentioned a little bit earlier. In central New York, I think we have this almost like there's great people and I have wonderful friends and there's a lot of great things to do. But in central New York, we kind of have this woe is me, the weather stinks, the economies. Can you talk about, as an outsider coming in, because I grew up here, so that was kind of what I grew up knowing. As an outsider looking in, can you talk a little bit about what your perception of this area is and how you feel about it?
Yes, echo what you're saying about, some people being, negative about the weather or the opportunities, or, as you said, because you've traveled, you've had the benefit of seeing other things. So I do think if you have experienced other areas, other stresses, other quality of life issues, you can more appreciate what we have here in central New York, in that I think, pretty sophisticated area in terms of you do have culture, you do have art, you do have, venues, you do have sports, you do have various industries, a medical industry, a legal industry, a tech industry. So there's a lot going on, but it's on a smaller scale. And so you have access to all these things. It's just on a smaller scale. And because it's a smaller scale, you don't have the stresses of having to book a restaurant 2 hours early. You can just show up and generally get served. You don't hit traffic now. There's been construction recently and people get stuck in 5 minutes of traffic. Yeah. So, I think, until you've lost it, you can't appreciate the simple things, that you can just pull up and find parking, that you can decide you're going to a Syracuse football game or basketball game and you can leave an hour before.
Yeah.
You can get tickets pretty soon. You have access to an airport. You don't have to get to the airport 3 hours early. So all these things that you might not appreciate, they don't necessarily exist in other areas. But, for me, my 2 older children are away at school, and I want them to maybe start outside of central New York. So not that they need to come back or I want them to come back, but I think it's important to, if you have the opportunity to see other things, to let you appreciate. The grass is always greener. That definitely applies to central New York. I think the people here are amazing. And, I was talking to someone about this recently that, people say, oh, it's a great place to raise children. And I do think that's true, but I've always, as someone who expects a lot of my own life and I want to make sure I have a full and fulfilling life, it's almost like a consolation prize. It stinks as an adult, but at least it's a great place to raise children. And, I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I think it's a great place to be an adult.
Right.
I think it's a great place to be a father.
Right.
Yes, my children have all the benefits of, space. We're lucky enough to have safe neighborhood and things like that. But it's also a great place to, I don't want to admit to myself, because it's not true, that I'm giving up on my life.
Right.
I want to make sure if it's not working for me, then we're going to find a better place that it works for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a cop-out sometimes when people say, well, it's a great place to raise kids. And it's an implication that it's not a great place to be a dad or to be a professional or to be, someone who wants to have fun.
Right.
I think it's a great place for all those things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I also couldn't agree more about the experiences, that you need to have the whole breadth of other experiences to be able to appreciate it. So you've been 15 years with Barclay Damon. You're in a position where you're now a partner. I think the great thing that you just said, and I think you can live wherever you want now. I think COVID has shown us, and post-COVID, that the world is flat, right? As it is, I can get onto a Teams call or a Zoom or a Skype meeting and be anywhere in the world that I need to be, right from my office in my room.
Right.
So, we can, even though we are in central New York, we can do business with people in New York City or Boston or Atlanta or LA,
right.
And we do it on a daily basis. And that money, if we have enough people, we can get the money coming here for us. And I would even venture to say, as a salesperson in me, we don't have to be 60% of the cost.
Right.
Maybe we could be 85% of the cost,
Correct.
right? Or maybe even we could compete on an even playing field, because if you are truly giving that same service and that's what they expected to pay, then why not? Why can't we have the best people here in Central New York? So now you're 15 years with Barclay Damon. You're in a role, you're in not only a lawyer, a partner, and have to litigate. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, and I think it's great because I think you're a recruiting realist, right? I think so many people, say, oh, I'm going to recruit you and you're going to be here for 20 years. And we're talking to people who just graduated and they're going, they can't even, they're just hoping to land a job. They couldn't imagine, 20 years. You can't be only 22 years old, right? So can you talk about, when you recruit people to work with you, maybe what you try to focus on, what's important to you, and then also, what you look for in them so that you can make sure that you're choosing the right people to work with you?
In my situation, I'm somewhat biased as somebody who had some experience in the workforce before I went to law school. So I do look for, I like to see, because everyone who's applying for the law job has gone to college and has gone to law school. So if there's something else, whether it's volunteerism or whether it's 3 years, or they were a real estate agent for 3 years, or they were a stockbroker for 4 years, I'm interested in hearing about those experiences and why they made the switch. But not only because it tells me about how are they going to make another switch in 6 months, or are they going to be able to articulate what it is about this next chapter that's going to be different? But they also have had 9-to-5 jobs before, and they've had a boss that might have been demanding, and they've had, to answer calls on vacation before. So I do like someone who may have had some experience, even if they went straight through school. Yep. They had something over the summer, or they had something at school. So I do like to see that. But I also like to see, like you said, I don't need to know where they see themselves being in 20 years, but I do like to see some tangible evidence that they are a hard worker. And it's not enough to say I work really hard. It's what do you see in terms of the experience, in terms of did you have a job in high school? Did you like all these things? That's what impresses me. Or it at least gives me some indication that they're not going to fold when the work gets difficult. Right. Because there's a big difference between academic success and academic life and work success. It's really about the work and the passion and the ability to communicate. What we do sometimes is we actually give real world examples to them to try and work out. Okay. So the interview process. Yeah, you can take this home with you, but we want to see your answer to this. How do they communicate? So, that's fantastic. Do you work with a company to give that? No, that was my own. I was thinking if I hired this person, and we don't just hire grads, we hire people that have been out for 2 or 3 years. So they say they know how to do this, and I'm like, okay, if you know how to do this, and it's not, and I'd say I understand might seem a little like harsh, but I would expect you to be able to do this. I don't want to have to teach you this when you show up day one. Because there's a lot more to teach. So if, based on this interview, it sounds like you've done some of these things. So here's a A-level example that you should be able to address. Great. How often has that saved you from the wrong hire? At least half the time. Really? Yeah. And then the half that get it, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be hired. But I learned that because I heard investment banks and hedge fund places, they have these logical tests for people. Mm-hmm. It's another example, keep your eyes open what other industries are doing and say, maybe how do I implement this here? So, yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah. Can you give me an example of a particularly challenging client, or maybe a particularly challenging person that you've had to work with, and kind of how you might have had to overcome that? Maybe you have a story or something that particularly sticks out. Yeah, and I am recognizing that this is on video. So, but what I would say is, clients are, our lifeblood is clients, and they're hiring us to perform a task. And if they could do it themselves, they would. There's usually a problem. They're planning on suing someone because they need to protect their business, or they've been sued and they need to try and save their business. So they're under pressure. So what I try and do, and I'm pretty good at this, not perfect at it, I do try and put myself in their position. So I often think about it, if I was hiring somebody, a doctor to perform on my child, or I would be a pretty demanding dad for that surgeon. I'd ask a lot of questions. I wouldn't take anything for granted. So I'm able to put myself in that position, but also I try and take advantage of it if they are demanding, if they're demanding, it makes you better. It makes you a better lawyer. It makes you a better service provider. So I have taken lessons from all of my clients, some of which were, not too difficult, some which were more difficult. I'd say I learned the most in the experiences with the most difficult clients, because we eventually got to a solution, and it made me a better lawyer, but a better communicator, a better, it's like a coach. It's like a coach in sports. You got the coach who's just like, don't worry about it that you didn't get that rebound. And then you got the coach who's like, there's a way to do it. You got to get that rebound. It's going to make you work harder. So there's a balance. You want everyone to be polite and to be professional, but, quote unquote, difficult clients bring out the best in you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dennis, we've talked about a lot today, and there are some other things that are unique to you, I think, as a person, which people would be very interested to hear about. And there's 3 particular things. And the first one I want to talk about is just the role that humor has played in your life. I think that without a doubt, you're one of the funniest people that I know, and you're very quick-witted. It's not like you're a joke teller, or you're just somebody that reads the situation, can understand a room, typically finds the right thing to say. So is that something that's come naturally to you, and have you been able to use that to your success in the business world at all? Can you talk about humor and just being a funny person in general?
Sure, and it's well, thank you. But I would say, growing up in my environment, I've talked about my mom and being an Irish immigrant. I was surrounded by 19 first cousins. So my mom was one of 6 sisters, and Catholics don't believe in birth control. So there were a lot of kids running around, and it was just keeping up with people. And I was fortunate enough to have an environment where there were lots of fun and lots of humor and lots of music around. So it was an entertaining environment. And I saw, I was always impressed by my funny uncle or my funny older cousin. And luckily, whether I'm funny or not, I'm not sure, but I try to be. But I think, in the business world, and this is for an audience that are people entering the business world or in the business world, I think it's an incredible asset, first of all, for recruiting. If you're recruiting somebody and you want them to join you, and do I want to work with this person? And if, and I'm in a position now where I'm a practice group leader, so they might be working, quote unquote, for me. Do you want your boss to have a sense of humor? Do you want him to seem like a real person? So just in recruiting, it's very helpful humor, but also in business generation. If you're trying to land a client, do I want to work with this person? I like having lunch with this person. It's a good sense of humor, but you have to pick your spots, because I'm in a very serious world too. There's a lot of, it's patent law, it's technology, there's money at stake, there's businesses at stake. So they want someone they can rely upon. So I tend to use humor in the workplace at moments where I don't take chances. It has to be appropriate. It's always appropriate. The timing has to be right. If it is a very serious moment, you can't be too lighthearted.
You leave a lot in the holster?
Yeah. But there are moments too where you're at an impasse, or people are frustrated, or the call's been going too long and you need more information, or you need to get some resolution. It does lighten the mood. So, and especially, and I didn't notice it until COVID with all the Teams calls, you can see people's faces, how they react to a joke and a smile. Yeah. And it's usually self-deprecating. I'm usually making fun of myself, obviously never making fun of other people, but making light of the situation, or it really helps the mood. And when people are in a better mood, they're generally better motivated. So
awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And the temperament of it, you've got to be so aware of your strength. And I think that's where the intelligence piece comes from it, and being able to play off of what the energy that you're getting from other people, and how that can completely lighten the tension of a room. It's great. Yeah. Can we talk about processes for you, and kind of in a given week? I'm sure that your days aren't like, every day from 6 a.m. to 9, but you also find time to work out. You also find time to run, and I think work with a trainer. Can you talk about how that all started, and who may have influenced you on that important piece of your life?
Sure. I think, processes at work is you have to make sure you make time for marketing and business development. So your days are always busy, but put something on the calendar, whether it's a half hour a day or 1 hour, on Wednesdays, to do those things that aren't part of the normal day-to-day, but are important. But outside of work, in terms of working out, or, making time for for family or whatever. It's super important to put things on your calendar and make them non-negotiable. So in terms of working out, it's not something I've done for a long time. I've done it for the last 4 or 5 years. I had some friends that encouraged me to do it. I've decided I'm going to work out 4 days a week. And it's just like brushing my teeth. I'm doing it every day. I am going to find time to do it. And if it means, doing it in the morning and, doing things later at night, I get it done. So it's really about just making things non-negotiable, because if they're optional, we've seen New Year's resolutions that are done by February 1st. It has to be non-negotiable. It has to be like brushing your teeth. It has to be like breathing. I'm going to get things done. But the key is to not overshoot. Don't say I'm going to work out 7 days a week.
Right.
I'm going to work out 3 days a week. I started working out 2 days a week, and then I grew it to 3. So that's just one example, but it's make reasonable goals and make them non-negotiable.
Excellent. Excellent. I think the most fascinating thing about you is that I met you at a party, and I remember just being at this party in our neighborhood, and I'm kind of dancing away, and I'm realizing, man, this is one of the most fun parties that I've ever been at. And then I realized that you were controlling the music. And I thought, I haven't danced this much since maybe a wedding or college, even being at a bar or a dive bar type situation. Here I am in this other friend's house. I hadn't met you before. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that you were running the music. Yeah. And your nickname in some circles is DJ. Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that side of you? Because it just speaks to how well-rounded you are as an individual. And can you talk about the opportunities that's brought you?
Sure. So it started, I was turning 40 and going to have a big party. People came to the house for, a couple hours, and then we were going to all jump in a bus and we went off to a place around here called Turning Stone. But for the 2 hours, I just created a playlist, and it was some of my, favorite songs, but it was dance music, whatever. And then what I realized was it was an amazing night, and it was an amazing night at the Turning Stone, but I had more fun at the pre-party, at my house. And I started to realize that I missed it too. I missed going out dancing and things like that. So slowly if I went to someone's house, I'd say, if you don't mind, I'll just take over the music. And it's really about, reading the room. It's about seeing some places, my sisters, those are country folks. There's people that like rap music. There's people that like rock, and there's people that like all of it. So I think what I've figured out is I can keep everybody happy, but I really enjoy thinking about it in advance. If someone says, yeah, please, do you mind doing the music for my party? I do like thinking, what's the age of the people? Sometimes there's a wide age. I do some research, I put together a playlist, and then it's not just hitting play, it's watching the crowd, deciding, I was wrong, I'm going to pivot, and what gets people out on the dance floor. I take a lot of pride in adding to parties. I'm usually at someone else's house, they're already throwing a great party. I just get a lot of fun. I get a lot of satisfaction out of, helping people throw great parties. It's also part of the high pressure job, lots going on, family commitments, and then it's a release so I really enjoy it. I think music is a key in a lot of people's lives. It's their outlet, it's their source of relaxation, and I've enjoyed being able to lighten the mood in places and give people a good time. So.
You do an unbelievable job at it. You've DJ'd many of my parties, which I would have paid you for, but you've insisted that I don't, which right. I infinitely appreciate. But also, I asked you one time about, you just mentioned about reading the room and the preparation and how much thought and I think you've also had the opportunity to do not just people's parties, but I think you've done reunions, you've done high school.
I've done weddings.
All just from your phone. But I think that the thing that separates you and makes you successful in that also is how much time you take to prepare that. When I heard that, how could you not be taking money for it? But could you talk about how much thought you actually take into that?
Yeah, for a 3 or 4 hour party, it's easier now because I've done it a bunch, but I used to spend 6 to 8 hours kind of, and it wasn't all just, I'd be listening to music, and the rule was if I couldn't get at least halfway through a song without thinking about fast forwarding it, it wasn't the right song. And then I would, whoever was hosting the party or the wedding, I would get their input, but it's also saying no to people when they want to hear that song that I know is just a killer.
Yeah.
I have to politely not play that when the dance floor is packed. Don't play Paul Anka. We're not doing that. So it's being polite about it. So it is reading the room, and it's I did have the experience of growing up dancing a lot and going to clubs and going to bars and sing-alongs, and you kind of know what it's like to keep things going. So it's a lot of fun.
And just if we could end with two stories, and they're both about the same play, but I think that one is the CNS reunion, the 80s reunion. If you could talk about the experience of being the DJ there, I think you have two things that I wanted to hear, but can you just maybe give us that story real quick? Because I think plays into the having to say no to somebody else, but also having such a good experience that the guy was trying to
you talking about the guy who was a professional DJ there? Or?
No, the owner of the club wanting to.
That's true. Yeah. So one of the interesting things is I'm wearing contacts today, but I'm a nerd at heart. I'm a patent lawyer with glasses, and you wouldn't think that I'd be playing, hardcore rap from the 80s or whatever.
Your friend Biggie, right? You guys were growing up in the Bronx together.
So when I was asked, there's a local high school, CNS high school around here, and I was asked by a friend who had seen me at a house party, would you mind doing our reunion? And it happened to be a reunion around my age, so it was perfect group for my music. It's a local bar that typically didn't have music, and the place was going crazy. People are dancing, and the owner comes over and says, hey, can I have you on Saturday nights? Can this be your regular gig?
Well, didn't he extend you for a couple hours? They say first
it was supposed to end at 11. It was already 1 o'clock, and I had to go home because it was fun, but it was time to go. And then he said, listen, I don't know what your regular gig is on Saturdays, but we'll figure out I'll pay you a handsome, amount. And I said, well, my regular gig is I'm a patent attorney and I'm a dad.
I'm not a DJ.
I'm not a DJ. I just do this for fun. And he was complimentary. He's like, yeah, the typical DJ is they're trying out new music and they're trying to impress people. He was like, just play what they want to hear. Yeah, and that's the.
Yeah, you're very humble, but I remember the story was the gentleman that owned the club said, "We've never had so much fun. We've never had so many people on the dance floor.
Right.
Typically, at the end of these things, people leave.
Right.
It's 1 o'clock. This thing ended at 11, and I've never sold so much.
Right.
What do I need to pay you to get you here next week?" So Dennis is a very humble guy, but I think it's the preparation and what you put into your whole life that's part of the success, right? Being a DJ just happens to be one of the things that you do well amongst a whole bucket of other things that you also do well. Wow. So, and then I think during that time you had, I think it was Freebird that one kept requesting, right? Was that, can you play Freebird? Can you play Freebird? Can you Freebird? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me correctly, you ended the night by showing him that Freebird was going to kill the dance floor, and that you made that your last song.
And I wanted to go home.
Is that an accurate statement?
That is accurate. It was time to go home, so it was an easy out for me. It cleared the place. So,
excellent.
Anyway.
So he fulfilled his request and simultaneously showed him that playing it at 10 o'clock was not going to be a winner. So, Dennis, I've enjoyed our time together. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time, and I hope we can do it again sometime, but I know that we've only scratched the surface on the many layers that you have, so thanks so much.
I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited for your work here, and hopefully it helps people.
So, absolutely. Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.